Do you think the reason or part of the reason he brought these comments up, obviously he was asked about the All-Star game in his season, so I get that.
Yeah.
But is there any chance they have an offer on the table to him right now that he looked at and said, this isn't even close? Do you think there's a tiny part of, do you think that might be the case?
I think there's something at play there for sure. Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I believe this is the 55th episode, the Johnny Boychuk episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. So thank you very much for listening. We have the New England Hockey Journal's Evan Marinofsky here today to talk a little Bruins. Maybe he'll drop in some nuggets about the ISL and some of the prep school hockey and some of the things he's working on for the Hockey Journal as well. And I have seen Evan's smiling face on Nesson a few times. So
Oh
hats off
God.
to him, doing a great job hosting. What's the name of the show? Is it the New England Hockey
It's
Journal
just
show?
New England Hockey Journal.
There you
That's
go.
all it is. So yeah, people always send me photos from the bar, like you're on TV here, and I'm like, nobody's listening to it, so it doesn't
Yes,
matter.
yes.
I find
Yeah.
I get a kick out of it.
When the novelty is there, when you first start going on TV, that happens all the time. That happened to me when I first started going on NBC too. I'd get people sending me videos or pictures of them at a bar with me smiling on the TV screen. That's always fun.
It is fun. It's a cool thing.
Absolutely. All right, let's thank our sponsors, FanDuel Sportsbook, CLNS exclusive wagering partner, FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Download the app, visit fanduel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL playoffs right now. Fun to watch and all kinds of other things going on. Maybe you can bet on what kind of jacket Taylor Swift is going to wear to the Chiefs playoffs games. So, who knows? Let's also thank our other sponsor, Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Fast, flavorful, nutritious, ready-to-eat meals, delicious. I am not only a spokesman, also a client. I like the food. It's very good. We do a lot of the different meal kits and Factor meals. I like because you just pop it in the microwave and it's done in 2 minutes. I know a lot of them send the ingredients. There's all kinds of other stuff. My wife likes some of those. I like to eat no fuss, no muss, throw them in the microwave. Head to
I don't
Factor.
blame you. And with kids and stuff, I feel like that's the easiest thing.
Yes, you have to. And it is perfect for kids too, because the kids have the chicken nuggets and the French fries, and you're not going to eat that 5 days a week. So you got to have something you can pop in the micro in 2 minutes.
That's
If you're on
exactly
the
it.
run and you're going to hockey practice, all that stuff. So head to factormeals.com/Hags50 and use code Hags50 to get 50% off your first box. All right. Evan, thank you very much for joining us. Anything off the hop that you particularly wanted to talk about with the Boston Bruins, or something that you have observed that you were just dying to talk about?
Oh geez. I gotta say Monday's win over the Devils was, I imagine we'll get to Swayman in a bit, so I don't
Yep,
wanna
yep.
spoil that.
We will get there.
Um but I think that win, unless I'm forgetting a game, because it's a long season, so some games slip through the cracks. That might have been the best 60-minute effort I've seen from them all year. It definitely was the best 60-minute effort I've seen from them in the last couple weeks for sure. And again, I know the Devils were hurt. I know that they are not a team near full strength, but I just look at the way that they played offensively, the way they created, the way that they were in their own zone, the way that Jeremy Swayman was in net. And I liked it. I was impressed. I think in considering also coming off that road trip, you're coming back. It's not a perfect spot to win in, first game at home after a long road trip. And they didn't just win the game. They were the better team for the entire game. So that's my big thing. The other thing is Nesson had a tough day on Monday that was wild.
You know what? I don't think it's just that day. The West Coast trip, that road trip they were on, I felt like there was issues with the feed several times in several of those games too. At one point, it looked like the screen was covered in Vaseline, like it was just a really bad picture. And I know my wife and son were telling me that Jack Edwards sounded like he was broadcasting out of a tin can at one point yesterday. with the audio.
It sounded terrible. It
Yeah, and I
was
know there
they
was
had a
all
tough
kinds of
time.
stuff going, but like the feed in general, I felt like for 3 or 4 games in a row, like there were issues almost every single game. So that's not usually like, sometimes that's just technical difficulties and that's just nobody's fault. And
Yes, it could
whatever.
easily be nobody's fault.
But there was I've noticed that over the last week, 10 days, the feed has been weathering the storm. I think they're in the dog days of the hockey season, just like the Boston Bruins are, as they're going through things. So like I did notice that as well. And my wife like was watching the game and she actually sent me like a video of when the screen went crazy with all the like boxes and everything. Um, but yeah, point taken. I liked the win. I thought it was a very solid win. I love the way that they dominated the first period and then came right out and scored in the first 30 seconds of the second period and really just like did not allow anything to go sideways. So many times you see that happen where a team can't put a goal in the first, or a goal gets overturned like it did in the first period for the Bruins on the offside challenge. And then they come out and the other team scores at the beginning of the second and just steals the momentum from them and really gives them a gut punch and kind of takes control of the game. The Bruins did not allow that to happen. I thought it was a good win, an impressive win coming off a road trip where they like worked really hard and a lot of guys had to play huge minutes.
Mhm.
So you expect a little bit of a letdown. So in all those respects, I thought it was an excellent win and a great win. I would not term it one of their best this year because the Devils didn't have Jack Hughes, the Devils didn't have Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, that's
Devils
where
were
it's like
missing a
you
bunch
can't.
of their players, and I feel like they were going against a less than their best Devils team, so they were kind of ripe for the picking at that point too. But the Bruins still took care of business. Nigel Dawes played a really good game. Nico Dawes, excuse me, played a really good game.
Nigel Dawes,
I know.
former player.
Exactly. He played a really good game in net for the Devils. I thought he was excellent and he kept them in it and he made them work for the goals that they got. So yeah, solid win all around, coming off a solid win at the end of the road trip. The Bruins missing Brandon Carlo on that road trip, losing him early, and it really made Charlie McAvoy averaged over 28 minutes a game in those 4 games on the road, and they got his minutes way down yesterday, which was important. Same thing with Hampus Lindholm. Those things as well. A bunch of the forwards that had played heavy minutes on the road, they were down as well yesterday. So all in all, it was a really good win to sort of balance things out and give them a little bit of a rest, a less taxing game after it was a grueling road trip. So I liked all that stuff. The one thing I wrote about yesterday, and I didn't even plug myself, I think, when I started this episode. You can go to joehaggerty.substack.com, get a premium membership, get all my content sent to you. And I also write for the Boston Sports Journal columns after every single game. And what I wrote for the Boston Sports Journal yesterday, I think a lot of people wrote about Swayman. I wrote about him a few days ago. So what I wrote about yesterday was just Charlie Coyle.
Oh, I know.
Continues to really step up into a much bigger role that the Bruins absolutely needed somebody to step into the void. And I find it interesting. And what I wrote about yesterday is he's kind of stepped into a Patrice Bergeron role with this team. He really has, with the way that he plays, the two-way 200-foot game. Now he's centering Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak in kind of a perfection line redux. Like they're sort of
Mhm.
recreating that magic of that top line and sort of loading up on that line. And he provides a Bergeron-like presence on that line with those other two wings and kind of recreates what they were able to do so well a little bit. And it's interesting that Jim Montgomery started to tap into that. He took 26 faceoffs in that game yesterday, took a ton. Like every time it was a big faceoff, Coyle was out there. Plays in all situations, is killing penalties, scored the game-winning goal, had that great play on a backhander that when they scored 30 seconds in the second period on a really nice shot. And the numbers are there. Like he's on a pace for 29 goals and 60 plus points this year, which are very Bergeron-esque overall production numbers as well. So, like, you could make the argument that Charlie Coyle has kind of stepped right into Patrice Bergeron's shoes in a lot of respects. And the biggest reason the Bruins have not had an issue this year at center like we thought they were going to is Charlie Coyle. He has really stepped up
Yes.
into, like, a lot of people wondered doubted if he was ever going to be a top six center. Thought he was kind of a third line center. Was always sort of pegged in that role because the offensive production wasn't there consistently. And he obviously still has a whole second half to go. He's like at about 15 goals and 30 something points right now, but he's on pace to shatter his career highs, which happened like 7, 8 years ago in Minnesota. As far as offense goes. And I really think you just there needs to be a big tip of the cap to Charlie Coyle as he continues to play in a primary role with the Bruins and do something he's never done before in his NHL career, and is kind of having a career year when the Bruins really needed him. And you flip it on the other side, when they were going through that stretch right before Christmas where they really started struggling, lost 5 or 6 games, were having a hard time scoring goals, that Charlie Coyle went scoreless in that stretch. And I think there's a direct correlation between the Bruins offense really struggling, if it's going to struggle, and Charlie Coyle going dry offensively. The two things happened at the same time, and I don't think it was a coincidence by any means. I think one thing kind of led to the other. That's how reliant they are on Charlie Coyle to step up and provide offense behind David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand right now.
I completely agree. I think Coyle has played, obviously, I think the best hockey of his career this year. And you're right. The Bergeron thing's interesting because before the season, I kept saying, you know, obviously you can't recreate Bergeron's leadership or what him and Krejci are able to provide. And I get that, right? But just look at the production, right? Both guys, what they're producing points wise. Is it crazy to think Coyle and Zacha can do similar numbers? And so far, again, and Coyle has played it's not like Coyle's on pace to set a career high just playing with Pastrnak and Marchand. He's played with a bunch of different wingers. And again, 32 points in 43 games. Bergeron would be right around there, I think. And so, like, again, I go back to, he's able to play the defensive side well. He's fairly good on faceoffs. Just the way he's able to play, all those different little things. And I don't want to say he's an upgrade because he's not. Bergeron is still Bergeron, but he is quicker and he is younger. And I think there is that element to it. I'm not saying it's a better option.
He's bigger too. That's
the other
part
thing.
Of it too.
That's a big part of it.
He's a bigger dude too. And physically, he's bigger.
He's huge, and I think he's also finding that confidence because for so long around here, it was, can he be a top six center? Can he be a top six center? And the tough part was that he never really got the chance to be a top six center for a while, right? It was always stepping in for a little bit, or it'd step up and be the right wing on the second line for a little bit. It was never for extended periods of time. And I think Coyle has, through 43 games this year, I think he's ascended past he's a placeholder up there, and he's better though when he's in your bottom six. It's clear that's not the case anymore. It's clear, at least this season, that you are better when he is in your top six, when he is contributing. And I think that just what he's provided you, he can play in any situation. I just think that, again, he's playing the best hockey of his career, and he looks phenomenal. I mean, just everything, the puck protection, his D-zone coverage, all that stuff. He just looks great. I mean, that's the thing. Like, and he's sort of finding his spot, and his spot on this team might be the number one center on this group. And again, I know there was a lot made of last year in that Panthers series when Zacha and Coyle were the top two centers and they won those games. And I kept saying, well, that was 2 games in the playoffs or 3 games. There's adrenaline involved in that. It's kind of a must win. You can't take too much off that, but that seems to have been something that was sort of a glimpse into what the future would be. And as you said, they've not had any problem really at center this year because Coyle's held it down. And Zacha, I know he's been on the wing a bit, but Zacha's also done his job too.
Yeah, and maybe that series against Florida for Coyle in particular was a springboard confidence-wise going into this year too, just seeing that he absolutely can do it, and he could step into that role if it were vacated by Bergeron, as it was when he retired in the summertime. So one thing I really liked is we asked him after the game yesterday, kind of, is this your best NHL season? Those sort of questions. And he was basically like, look, I'm just trying to play the right way, do the right things, like whatever. But he also admitted, he's like, well, if I go out and crap the bed in the second half of the season, is it still my best NHL season? He's like, it's halfway over yet. I'm not gonna, pronounce anything done, and pronounce all these great things happening when the season's halfway over. Like, he's got a great mentality as far as like finishing out the whole thing, knowing the playoffs are the most important, building every day, getting better, helping the team win, like all that stuff. He's become a true leader on this team, and one of the I think he learned a lot, as much as anybody else, working alongside Patrice Bergeron for as long as he did. And I think that had a really big impact on him, and a good positive impact. And he's kind of, I think maybe aspired, or maybe said to himself and challenged himself when Bergeron retired, like, you need to step up and be more of that kind of player to this team moving forward. And I think he's done exactly that. So, big credit to Charlie Coyle for, really going out and showing some people things that he'd never done before, and raising his profile of who he is and what he can be. And if he continues to play this way, he's going to get, I think, Selke votes at the end of the year, because of the defensive game, because of the penalty killing, because of the amount of faceoffs he's taken for the Bruins, because of the stuff that he's doing. I think he's going to start, getting consideration for higher things and bigger, better things because of the way that he's played. So full credit to him. Another
Are you
guy.
worried, before we move
Yeah.
on, are you worried at all that they're riding him too much? That we're
No,
gonna get to the playoffs and it's gonna be, he's clearly warned. I'm not saying he will be, but I mean, is it a worry? Because he's playing a ton.
I am gonna move. I was gonna talk about something else, but I will actually segue into something else we were gonna talk about because it kind of dovetails with this perfectly. I don't think particularly for him there's a concern, because I don't think his minutes have been that out of whack. You haven't seen him playing 20 plus minutes a night a lot this year. I think when I look at the game sheets after they're over, I don't see him going over 20 a lot. I think they're wary of that with him, and careful about that with him. But I do think there is a concern, and I've written about this over the last week or two as well. There's a concern of riding certain players too much and not playing the fourth line enough, and not playing bottom pairing defenseman enough. And, all of a sudden, Pastrnak is playing like 23, 24 minutes in a game, and Marchand's going over 20 a lot. And, other players might get up in that range. Those two usually the ones with the biggest forward ice times. But like, Carlo goes down last week, and McAvoy's basically playing 27, 28, 30 minutes in these overtime games, and Lindholm as well playing like huge minutes, because Mason Lowry is playing 12 or 13 minutes, and Shattenkirk is getting protected on the road in certain situations, and
Yep.
things like that are happening. That is a concern, and that's something like in January, February, you need to be very wary of, that you're not riding any of those guys so hard now that they're just going to be a shell of themselves by the time the playoffs start, and there's not going to be enough gas in the tank. And I think that's definitely something that the Bruins are aware of, and I think it was part of the reason Trent Frederick was centering the fourth line yesterday, because I think there's a conscious effort on their part to try to play the fourth line more, to lighten the load on everybody else. Because typically you've seen when it's Johnny Beecher, Oscar Steen, Jacob Lauko, they're playing like 7-8 minutes a night. And maybe Beecher plays a
Yeah.
little more because he kills penalties, but like really not getting any more than 10 minutes. And you need to be playing your fourth line guys more than 5, 6, 7 minutes a game, to lessen the workload on the forwards. It's a little tougher when Carlo's hurt and Forbort's hurt to do that with the defenseman, and I think they're just gonna kind of have to suck it up to a degree in certain situations. But I think that is something they have to be wary of, and they have to be thinking about over the next couple months.
And I agree with you. I think the other thing you have to think about is like you have a lead in the Atlantic. Obviously, the Panthers are gaining ground, but you're not going to fall out of the playoffs if you play
Right.
your fourth line, a few more extra minutes. I agree with you when it comes to third periods of close games against good teams. You got to earn the right to play in that third period or down the stretch. I get that, but
Yeah.
I agree with you where like, if you play your fourth line 5 more minutes, or even less, like you're not falling out of the playoffs. And there are times I worry that they're going so hard in the regular season and trying so hard to, rack up this great regular season that the playoff. I mean, we saw it last year. The playoffs, they sort of fall apart. I think that's a worry, and like that's.
Yeah.
I think if I had a primary worry with this team, like yeah, the scoring. Guys like DeBrusque, you need to see a little bit more from at least production wise. Okay, and Ullmark with this injury, we'll see. But I think the overall big thing is just the kind of what I just mentioned there, where it's like you need to be in a spot where you're going to have success in the playoffs and you're not going to run out of gas. You're not going to be facing adversity for the first time come the playoffs. Now, they faced adversity this year. They have
Yep.
faced a lot more than they did last year, thankfully. But you don't want, as you said, you don't want guys, especially on D, running out of gas. And you also want to empower, like, I do think there is an argument to be made to empower some of those younger players to have more confidence come the playoffs. Because
Yep.
in a situation where a top dog on defense goes down like a Carlo, you need guys like a Wotherspoon to step up and have confidence that they can play more minutes and things. And I've liked Wotherspoon's game as a depth
Yep.
defenseman, as a fifth or sixth D, perfect. Like that, it's perfect, reliable, steady, fine. But yeah, that is a worry that if this continues, or if what happened a few weeks ago continued, you'd be in a much worse spot.
Yeah, and I think it may be that at the end of the year we look back on this team and said they had to ride the horses because they had to, this is one of those teams where they basically wrung every bit of what they could get out of it during the regular season, and they're just not as deep and as talented as some of the other teams, and I think that may end up showing in the playoffs. And you may end up seeing in the big picture like it was always going to be this way, where they kind of were a good regular season team and they got the most out of the team that they could, but they just didn't have the horses when it came playoff time. And it was more about getting some young guys experience in the playoffs and sort of, setting themselves up for, a run that's going to be 4 or 5 years now, with a lot of the young guys in a different core sort of leading this group. And it was like a transitional season. And we've definitely talked about that a lot as that potentially being the case.
Well, the NFL season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get 150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's pretty good math, right? That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. The best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
But Wotherspoon, I agree with you. I think he's been very good. He's obviously not dazzling. He's obviously not going to catch your eye with anything he's doing with the puck or anything he's doing offensively, but he's been extremely steady. He plays physical. He blocks shots. He will, clear bodies in front. He will stick up for his teammates. He will do little things on that are gonna get you more work in the NHL as a defenseman, because he doesn't hurt his team and he makes good plays, and he's kind of a well-rounded defenseman. Averaging 17 minutes a night. He's been a plus player, like everything that you want out of a bottom pairing defenseman. And I actually think it's interesting with him. I think he's gotten to a point that he's played so well. I think he's played like 17 games now or something like that, 15, 16 games. He's somewhere in there. I think he's gotten to a point where, like, if they try to send him down to Providence, another team's probably going to take him. Or maybe I
That's
think there's a real
right. Yeah.
danger of somebody else taking him, where he may have played himself into a role with this team for the rest of the year, based on the way that he's played and based on what he brings value-wise, depth to the team, where he's going to stick around and he's going to be a part of what they're doing. And he kind of helps make some decisions that maybe need to be made, or they were thinking about making anyway, as far as the defenseman they have, as far as, trading away a defenseman, as far as like everything. I think he's not the biggest factor, but I think he's a factor in all that now, because he really brings value to this team. And I think it's worth noting now, when he was up for a few games, you're like, oh, all right, call up from the AHL. He's playing okay, great. He's gotten to the point where he's starting to push his way into like the picture of like thinking about being on this team and being a part of this group. And I think it's a credit to the way that he's played.
I mean, again, I just wrote this down. Like, they're D pairings, right? Like right now, It's been like Grizzlick or Lowry with McAvoy. Let's say they're fully healthy, right? Let's say Carlo and Forbert are back.
Yep.
It's the playoffs. Somehow they're all 100% healthy, which obviously is not realistic because that never happens.
Right.
But let's just say Grizzlick or Lowry with McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Forbert, Shattenkirk. Does Wotherspoon work his way in to play with Forbert? Does Wotherspoon just pencil in as the 7th D? Do you put him out there instead of Shattenkirk? Is Grizzlick a part of that equation? Is Lowry but I think at the very least he's a 7th defenseman because he's reliable. And I think and he's steady. And I think when the playoffs come around, guys get hurt. And I think you're gonna need a guy like Wotherspoon to come in and eat minutes and play good defense. And so far he's shown that he can, and I don't think he needs to be anything more than that. If that's all he is, perfect. Perfect. Not every guy that comes up from Providence has to be, the ceiling is incredible and what he could be, the potential. And it's like, no, if that's all he is and he continues to progress as a good, steady bottom pairing defenseman, great. It's fine.
Well, that's basically what Connor Clifton did. He did the same sort of thing where he came on and just stuck and kept playing pretty good hockey and ended up getting better and better and a more important part of the team and sort of adding facets to his game. And like the physicality really started to come on, some of the other stuff too, as he got more comfortable at the NHL level. And I think Wotherspoon is doing that same thing where he's pushing his way into the picture and pushing his way into like their plans. And he's 26. He's been in the AHL for a few years, so it's not like he needs to go down in Providence and play. He's not this young prospect where you need to get him playing time and you're worried about him being a 7th D at times up here. I don't think that's an issue. I think he'd be totally fine playing in that kind of role, and he's become enough of a veteran pro hockey player that that could be his niche, at least until something shakes out and he's able to push his way into the bottom 6. But it was time to acknowledge that he's done a really good job and he's kind of earned a spot on this team with the way that he's played. I think the one thing I think we can talk about too is McAvoy. Going back to him, we talked about the minutes that he played and on the road trip, but I think bigger picture, I was kind of hard on him in November and December, rightfully so. I think he struggled a lot. He was a minus player big time in both of those months. I think he had his problems, especially right after Thanksgiving, or when they had that losing streak right around Thanksgiving, where they gave up 17 goals and they lost 3 in a row. He was bad. He was not a good player in those games. And I think he was a minus for 6 games in a row. But he's pulled out of it. He's back in the positive now. He had a great game at the end of the road trip. I think he really stepped up when they needed him to when Carlo went out on that road trip and played great hockey. And he's really sort of turned his game around to a better level. And, I've noticed lately too, he's getting a lot more aggressive offensively, which is good. Yep. And I think maybe as a sign of his overall comfort level with his game, maybe as a sign he's a little more confident and everything that's going on around him as far as the way his teammates are playing, and he feels a little freer to, step up into a bigger offensive role and take risks at times. But I've really noticed in the last month or so that he's been playing his best hockey of the season, and it really has translated into success for the Bruins.
It has. I agree with you. He almost scored again on Monday, hit the post and then missed his rebound. Classic defenseman, getting a scoring chance you never think you're ever going to get. You're like, oh, what do I do with the puck right here?
How about Marchand, by the way, hitting the post on the empty netter?
Oh my God. He missed 2 straight, right?
I know.
And then he had Marchand also had a one-timer that I think McAvoy might have passed it to him earlier in the game that he just had an open net. Yeah, hit the side of the net.
Yes.
That's got to be a terrible feeling.
I thought the goalie saved it, and then I was like, nope, he hit the side of the net.
He just missed. I agree with you. McAvoy's look better. I mean, ever since that suspension to Ekman Larson, the physicality wasn't there really afterwards, and I think his game took a hit because of it. And you nailed it. I mean, I think the confidence looks like it's there. Offensively, he's joining the rush at better times. He's more active in the O zone. And then just in his own zone, I think he's just been better defensively. Now, I also think that comes with, he played a little bit with Lowry earlier in the season, and I think those two acclimating together. You also look at like in the past, Grzelcyk McAvoy have been a pretty solid 5-on-5 pairing. This year, that has not been as much the case.
Yeah.
So again, I don't, he needs to be top dog on whatever pair he's on, right? Like it shouldn't matter so much who's playing with him. I mean, that does factor in, obviously, factor meals. It does factor in, but he should be the top dog on his pair. And I think he's been top dog for like the last month in terms of how he's been playing and just overall confidence and things like that. And I think that's a good sign. Now, you don't want to ride him so hard now and have him, again, burn out for the playoffs. But I think as a top defenseman in the NHL making his money, like that's kind of par for the course. You're playing those minutes. You're playing in every situation. Really not many nights off. Like that comes with the territory of being probably a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. Like that comes with the territory. And if they're going to win a cup, if they're going to go, if they're going to make a push this year and in future years, you're going to need him playing like this. So I think it's encouraging that he's been doing that.
Yeah, and he's been there in January. November, December, not great months for him. November, really not. December was a little better. January, I think he's right back to where he should be, he needs to be. And, like you said, frankly, based on the contract and his profile and all that stuff, he's playing more like a Norris Trophy winning defenseman this month than he was, I think, the previous couple of months before. So that's been a positive for the Bruins. All right. Twitter question of the week, Evan. Still not... we still don't have a sponsor for the Twitter question of the week. I am going to challenge all those people out there with deep pockets listening to this show to come sponsor the Twitter question of the week. Let's get it going. Even if it's like, pure hockey and they give like free sharpenings to Finn like every couple
that would be are you kidding? What, even if that's like the best case scenario? Are you kidding me?
Sparks hockey, if they want to send me free half fire wheels for the Sparks machine so I can just give out sharpenings for Finn's entire hockey team or both of his hockey teams, that would be fine too.
That's better than like a dad bringing like brownies or cookies to a game. I think the Sparks sharpening free stuff. Are you kidding me? That would be way better than that.
I much respect to all the dads out there with the sharpeners that take them to tournaments and stuff. Like I don't think I'd want to go through the whole like process of readjusting the thing again and making sure it's like aligned and all that stuff. Like, cause that's
too much work
if you're carrying it around and taking it places. I like it. It's my wife, much to my wife's chagrin, it's on the kitchen counter right now.
Oh my God.
Yes, it's towards the back, so it's not in the way when she's like making dinner or anything like that, but it's sitting right there. And I have not moved it once since I got it for Christmas. Just whip it out to sharpen. I had to sharpen Finn's skates. He got them sharpened at a place, and within 2 or 3 times he was on the ice, it sounded like metal on the ice when he was making turns. Like, I don't know what the hell was, I heard him take a hard turn and the sound it made was like, what the hell was that? I don't know.
You're like, I got to buy him new skates. I
don't know what happened with the sharpen, but like I put him right into the Sparks machine, did a couple passes and perfect. They were right back to where they needed to be. So that thing, I would also love to be a spokesman and a client because I'm already a client for Sparks now after Christmas time. So I highly recommend that machine. It's easy to use and it works perfectly. So if they want to step up and be the sponsors of this, hey, be my guest.
We do have Factor Meals to help us out. America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit when it does get busy, when it does get crazy, when we do need a quick meal. They fuel you up fast with flavorful and nutritious ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. Takes less than 2 minutes to cook them. They're fresh, never frozen. Meals ready in 2 minutes, like I said. They have calorie-conscious options, going upscale with some of the things they're offering now, like surf and surf meal options, roasted garlic filet mignon, and shrimp and Cajun spiced shrimp and salmon, which is like right in my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff I'm all about. So it's got everything for everybody. There's 34 plus chef prepared, dietitian approved weekly options for meals. You can get snacks, you can get breakfast items. Like it's a great deal. So if you want to get Factor Meals, go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use the code Haggs50 to get 50% off of your first box. It's a great deal. I've tried it. It's fantastic. I recommend it to you. We love these ready to make meal kits, especially when we're on the go with our kids. So one more time, that's factormeals.com/Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. You won't be sorry if you go to Factor Meals. It gets the Haggs thumbs up seal of approval.
The Twitter question of the week from Keith Bevan on Twitter. Hey, those comments from Swayman, RE, NHL arbitration process are concerning. Literally almost every player goes through it and hears criticism in the hearing. That's not true. Not every player goes through it. There's a select few players that go through it, but that's
most don't go through it.
Right. Fact that he's groaning on about it is concerning. Bruins should keep that info in the back of their minds. And for those wondering, here's what that is referencing. This is something Swayman said the other night after he found out about being an All-Star. Which congrats to him. I think that's well earned.
Yes.
Going to the All-Star weekend. Swayman, Pasternak, and Jim Montgomery all going to represent the Bruins. He said, that's really special first and foremost. It couldn't happen without the team in front of me. I mean, I'm so lucky to be on such a defensive structured team that takes pride in the D zone and of course gets it done in the offensive zone. So huge kudos to them for allowing this to happen. That's a goalie, like, giving all the credit to his teammates right there. I so far love it. But yeah, after dealing with what I did this summer with arbitration, hearing things that a player should never hear, it feels pretty special to be in this situation. So I'm extremely honored, and I'm really excited to join Pasta and Monty. Now, I didn't really take this as a warning sign. I really didn't have a lot of a problem with this because I think Swayman has mentioned this a couple of times, that he did not love the arbitration process. I think he's just being honest. I don't think any of the players love the arbitration process. I think he's used it as motivation, for sure. And it's made him a better player. And I think that's why he was sort of referencing it. And he sort of clarified that last night when he was asked about it, that he was kind of just talking about that being a past experience that's built up to what he's doing right now and how he's playing. Do you sense any concern? Did it raise anything, alarm bells with you, to see comments about arbitration when he was talking about being named an All-Star?
Yeah, trade him. No, I'm kidding. No, I think it didn't raise alarm bells. I think he's translated it into motivation, right? He's having the best season of his career so far. He's clearly improved.
Yep.
He's been the better of the tandem this year. So again, I think he's translated that into motivation. What I would say, and I don't think I don't want to be in Boston. I think what he's more saying and what he thinks, this is just me, my own opinion. My guess is he's not going to take a hometown discount to stay.
Of course not.
That's the big thing, right? Like
not.
that's a diversion from the norm that was here when Bergeron and Krejci were here. But those guys aren't here anymore, and the cap's going up, and guys want to make what they're worth.
Well,
and the
there's
reality,
also the simple fact, Evan, that Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman are the most important parts on this team this year.
By far.
They are the reason they're winning all these games is the goaltending that they're putting up. And he's the one that's having the better season. He's the one that's now going to the All-Star game. He's probably going to be the one that's going to start game one of the playoffs based on everything we've seen to this point. He's going to get paid. And you're right. I absolutely 100% agree with you that, and part of the reason he had that kind of mentality pushing things into arbitration last year too, that he didn't want to settle for whatever they were offering him, and he thought he was worth more. So that's been his approach consistently. I don't think that's going to change when it comes to his next contract.
No, it's not. And the other thing is, again, when you look big picture, right? Ullmark makes 5.25. Now that contract was signed, 3 years ago at this point. Obviously, Ullmark's going to make a lot more. Can you go into next season with, let's say, Swayman making 6.5, potentially 7? He's moved himself into that tier as an all-star, as a good young goalie in this league, stable young goalie. Probably should be making around what other good young goalies made around the league. So let's say it's that. Can you afford $12 to $13 million on your cap in net? And I think that's a real question, and that's more of an off-season topic, but I think it's worth talking about. Now, I'm not saying deal him. I think he's worth the money. You developed him on your own. He, to me, is the guy long-term. And then you also have to think about Ullmark is up after next season, and he's going to be due a big payday because in the last couple of years, the guy won a Vezina and has been one of the best goalies in the NHL. So I think you also have to consider Ullmark and that. So that might force their hand this offseason in trading a guy like Ullmark. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but the writing I think is on the wall in terms of that stuff. Because you're gonna have to pay Swayman. These comments, again, I don't want to get people pressing the panic button, but he's not taking $5 or $5.5 million. Like, he's getting paid. He should get paid. He deserves it. I think he's worked his way into that. So again, it's not alarming. I don't think it's like, I want to get out of here now. I hate this whole team. I hate the front office.
Right.
I think it's, I went through that. I had to put up with that BS. I've responded. I've made an all-star team. He still has a lot more to go this season. Because again, if he craps the bed, like Coyle mentioned, if you crap the bed the second half, or if you don't show up in the playoffs, that's going to take dollars off that next contract. But he's on pace to get paid, and he should if he continues at this pace.
Yeah, and he said the same things right after the arbitration hearing was done too. It's not like he's like all of a sudden talking about this now. He's pretty consistent.
He's like, guys, I got something to tell you. I've got to get this off my chest.
Yeah, he said this
arbitration wasn't
times.
fun.
This is not new. That he did not like that process, and he basically said right after it was over, he's like, I don't ever want to do that again. That was his comments like right afterwards. He's like, that's not something I'd ever want to do again. And oh, by the way, he's still an RFA right now for next year with, I believe, arbitration rights. So he would be right in line to do it again.
2 straight years arbitration. That'd be a record.
Clearly doesn't want to do. So that's why you've heard, murmurs of an extension out there, or, whispers of reports that, something might be cooking between those two sides. And I think I'm sure there's smoke to that fire. That's somebody they want to lock up, and they want to get to a contract extension. And honestly, this whole window was important, I think, too, of them seeing him play 5-6 games in a row to see how his performance would be, to see how consistent he could be, to see if he could handle the workload mentally and physically. And I think he's done it. And this was one of those bars that he had to jump over and sort of show them. And this injury to Ullmark sort of naturally created this scenario where he was able to do it and play every game for a couple of weeks and show that maybe he is one of those goalies that comes around that can play 60+ games in an NHL season, and be what, Tuukka was when he was here. And maybe they don't necessarily need a 1 and a 1A tandem if they have him, and if they're paying him $7 million a year, they can have Brandon Bussey as a $1 million backup, and they can trade Linus Ullmark and get some value for him as a guy that won the Vezina 2 years ago. Or last year now, would be 2 years ago this summer. But I think all that stuff sort of comes into play, and all those things sort of lay into that kind of a situation for the Bruins, I think. I think he loves it in Boston. I think he likes this team. I think he likes playing for Jim Montgomery, another humane guy. And I think it's a very humane friendly staff with Richter here too. I think there's a lot going on there where this is the perfect place for him. And I don't think any of these comments say to me, I can't wait to get to free agency and get the hell out of here. I think this is more about, him just sending the message. He doesn't want to go to arbitration again. He wants a contract extension. He knows what he's worth. He's not going to take a discount, as you said. And everything is trending towards the sooner the Bruins can take care of this and get them done, probably the better for them, because the price is going to continue to go up. What happens if they don't sign him to an extension now in the next couple of months? That's probably in the 6 to 7 range. And he goes out and he has a great playoff, and he carries them, deep into the playoffs and plays out of his mind.
That's another mill or two.
All of a sudden, the price tag is going to go up again, and it's going to be a couple more $1 million and it becomes, way more urgent as far as trading Ullmark. And it becomes a situation where you kind of have to trade him. If it becomes a, $14-15 million that you're, investing into goaltending, no team can do that. So I think this scenario could turn into, based on the way things are trending, It could turn into a worse situation for the Bruins if they wait and they don't like pull the trigger on whatever they have on the table with him now or what they're talking about. As he continues to jump over each hurdle and it pushes value up higher and higher. So this is going to be a really interesting thing to watch, and I think he is the most important player of all their unsigned guys to get taken care of now.
Oh yeah.
Over the rest of the second half of the year to avoid getting to another summer where all these things are at play.
I have two more leftover thoughts on this. The first is if their hand is forced, and it feels like it might be this offseason of trading Ullmark, right? If they decide to keep Grzelcyk and DeBrusk through the rest of the season and just hold on to them, because they both could get you something in a trade. I think both of them have value, not as much as Ullmark, but they do have value.
Yeah.
Let's say you decide to hold on to them for the stretch run, and you say, you know what, they're going to be like our additions. They're going to be additions at our deadline. Of those are guys that if we were a wild card team, we might trade away because we're not going to re-sign them, but we'll keep them for the stretch run. And instead in the offseason, they, go out and trade Ullmark. Maybe that makes up for it in terms of, you're going to recoup maybe draft picks, prospects. Maybe you do a 1-for-1 with a guy like Ullmark for a top 6 forward or something like that. But I think the better route is get some draft picks or, build the prospect a little bit. I would rather that. My second thing, and this is conspiracy theory. This is like, this is the mind working overtime. This is galaxy brain level thinking, and this is not insider information. But do you think the reason or part of the reason he brought these comments up, obviously he was asked about the All-Star game in his season, so I get that.
Yeah.
But is there any chance they have an offer on the table to him right now that he looked at and said, this isn't even close? Do you think there's a tiny part of, do you think that might be the case?
I think I think there's something at play there for sure. I do, but I also think there's a few things going.
Maybe that's not a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's normal. But I don't know. I think reading between the lines, maybe that is something.
I think there is. I think there's some of that at play. I think there's some of he is becoming a more vocal and confident leader on that team and becoming somebody that I think is becoming a little bit more of a prominent personality. And is sort of I think becoming a more influential member of that team. I think he's a young player that's sort of coming into his own as far as his value, who he is, his ownership of the team, all that stuff, I think is coming too. I think there's a lot of different things at play here. And I think it all points towards an ascending player. It all points towards a player that is pushing to another higher level in the NHL, stratosphere and the NHL sort of constellation of players. He's going from a guy that was thought of a certain way to he's pushing into a whole different level of pay, of who he is as a player, of how he's viewed, of all that stuff, and more into the star territory, more into the franchise player kind of territory, more into the extremely important player that could be a difference maker in a lot of teams kind of territory. Because we've talked about this, there's not as many goalies anymore that can play like a number one, play with a heavier workload and maintain their performance and sort of be like he is, which he's also a really marketable player, from a Bruins standpoint, from an NHL standpoint. He's funny, he's friendly. He's not one of those goalies that will not talk to anybody and not acknowledge the fans and will be like this, the tunnel.
He's a very normal person for a goalie.
He is, but he goes and takes selfies with the fans during warm-ups, and he has these, certain people in certain seats, they'll go and wink at them during whistles and play and stuff like that. And he jokes around with his teammates while the game is going on. And you can see times during the game, he's got a big smile on his face when things are happening out there. He is a player that I think is important and would be viewed as important to a lot of NHL teams just based on how he plays, who he is as a person, his makeup, all that stuff. And I think what we're viewing is a player that is realizing, as it's happening, his importance to the team and where he should line up and where he should be. And the contract is part of it. the way that he's playing this year, and he needs to back it up with his play. He needs to continue, as you said, the second half of the year and be the player that he's been. But he's like, top 5 in the NHL or right outside it in save percentage. He's certainly top 10 in goals against average. Is starting to show that he can play game after game after game without, his performance dropping down. Whereas with Linus Ullmark, we've seen when he plays a lot, his performance starts to drop off, and he has difficulty mentally and physically remaining sort of focused and locked in the more playing time gets thrown on his shoulders. So I think you're seeing a player that like realizes all that stuff, and all these things are also going on at the same time. So he's gonna be a really like fascinating player to watch over the course of the second half. But if I were to like be an advisor on the Bruins front office staff, I would tell them to take care of this sooner rather than later and to get it done with him, because I think the price tag is just going to keep going up based on the way that he's playing. And I've been consistent with this since training camp. I said this when I saw him on the ice at the beginning of training camp. And when I heard his comments when we talked to him after he signed his or the arbitration thing happened. And I knew that he had been, in Boston all summer, working out at Warrior every day and like getting bigger, stronger.
How personal he took that Game 7 loss too.
He threw himself into getting better as a player and doing the things you have to do if you want to push into that like higher level of NHL player. He did all that stuff. And I thought this year was going to be a breakout year for him, and it's turning out to be exactly that. And I think the Bruins need to recognize that and catch it now, before they end up on the tail end of it in like May or June after he has a great playoff, and like it's going to be at a price tag that they are going to have a hard time paying, or it's going to be harder for them than it is right now.
To me, I hit on what you just said. Swayman has the style of goaltending, the confidence, and I think the mentality to be a legitimate number 1 starting goalie in this league. And the sense I get from his comments and from how he plays is that the goalie tandem is nice. I think he likes it. I think he loves Linus Ullmark. I think they are like brothers, I completely, like I'm a father and son in a sense. The Uncle Sway. And, so that's great. But I do get the sense that at some point he wants to be the guy. That's what he wants to be. And I think
that's just the way it goes in the NHL, though. He's
exactly
get paid enough where he's going to have to be the guy, and there's just not going to be an ability to have a 1 and a 1A.
And I think that's going to be this offseason.
Yeah.
And it has to be, because they can't, even though they're going to have cap space, and even though the cap is going to keep going up, you can't have that much tied in with goaltending. You cannot have that much money tied up with it. And the other thing is you can't have all that money tied up in goaltending for the guys to both play like 45 games each, or around that, right? I'm not great at math, but around that, okay? And not have first and second round picks. You can't do that. To me, I don't see the logic there. And that's why I think, again, they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to make some drastic type move in the offseason. And I think it's going to end up being Ullmark. Again, I know this is something we're going to do this topic 1,000 times when the time comes, but I do think, looking ahead, I think it's becoming more and more clear to me that's going to probably have to happen.
But honestly, and I think your point is correct. I think this is something the Bruins are not surprised by, and they knew was going to happen.
No.
Why they set things up the way that they did. It's why when they signed Linus Ullmark to the contract, they did the no trade protection, gets lessened and lessened with each year, because I think they knew by the last year of that deal, they were projecting Swayman could be this. And if that were the case, they were leaving themselves the room to be able to move him based on the contract that they signed Ullmark to, and based on the no trade provisions that they gave him. So they kind of knew this was coming. And I think, best case scenario, which is the way it's turning out to be, based on the way both guys have played, it's playing out exactly how they thought it was going to. So I think there are plans in place that the Boston Bruins have. Obviously, it's, dependent on the goalie market for trades, depend on the demand that other teams have for goaltending, depend on what they can get, like all that stuff. But I think this is kind of tracking to be exactly what they thought they were going to do with this whole situation if Swayman turned into the goalie they thought he could be. And it's exactly what's happening. So, that part of it is good. And it's a good problem to have. if you have Swayman and Ullmark at the NHL level, Brandon Busty at the Providence level, and you know that if you trade one of the guys at the NHL level, i.e. Ullmark, Busty's going to be able to come up and be a serviceable backup and be a guy that can be an understudy to Swayman. But yeah, I totally think you're right. I think this is something the Bruins know they're going to have to deal with this offseason. I think they probably looked into trading Ullmark a little bit last year, but it just wasn't the goalie market didn't materialize like you thought it was going to in the summertime.
The trade market was so bad last summer.
It was. And it was probably
brutal.
better in season. Like they probably could have gotten something for him if they wanted to move him in season, especially when Edmonton, like their goaltending was horrendous to start the year. But I think they just can't do it based on how important both those guys are right now to that team and based on the situation that they have. But I would fully expect there's going to be a lot of movement to trade Linus Ullmark this summer coming up, just based on the way Swayman has played and based on their situation in general. Evan, thank you very much for joining us. I greatly appreciate it. You can check out Evan Marinofsky's stuff at the New England Hockey Journal. Anything that the people are going to be able to read coming up that you are working on right now that you want to tell them about?
Oh God. I mean, we got the magazine coming that's in the works. So that'll be out in the next week or so. So that'll be good to look forward to. Lots of features and things like that. And then just weekly coverage of preps, high school, some college. So we got a little bit of everything in there. So yeah, just rankings and uncommitted prospects and things like that. So lots of prep games. I'll see you at some. I know that. I always do.
I'm sure you will. I'll get Finn out there to the rink like I always do. Evan does a great job, so check out all of his stuff on the New England prep scene. He's all over it. He's boots on the ground at all these games, talking to people and watching the games. So he's got all the latest stuff for you. Let's also thank our sponsors. FanDuel Sportsbook, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. The app is easy to use and download. Spreads, player props, over under, so much more. Visit fanduel.com/Boston and get involved with the NFL playoffs right now. There's also Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Love them as a sponsor. When you're too busy to cook, you throw it in the micro for 2 minutes. Made by chefs, dietitian approved, just good stuff, delicious and healthy for you. So go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use code Haggs50 to get 50% off of your first box. Evan, thank you very much for joining us, my friend. This was fun.
Of course, always a blast.
Yes, it was. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening. That's it for now. We'll see you at the rink.